Salutations! It's time for a brand new installment for the full analysis of the Halo Beta series. On July 2nd, 2024, a Discord user by the name of Zill_Dreadnought uploaded a pre-release build of Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. This was the first build of the game to be released to the public, build 84513, and was dated to July 28th, 2011. A day after this build dropped, they would go on to release 4 more builds of CEA, all older than the last. Build 83147 from June 24th, 83424 from July 1st, 83712 from July 8th, and 84258 from July 21st. To make this easier to follow, I'll distinguish these builds by their compile date, and for a frame of reference, Halo CEA went gold approximately October 15th, 2011, and was build 88078. These builds were dumped from a Saber Interactive development kit, which also included 4 builds of Inversion and 1 build of Darksiders 2. I'll be comparing these builds to the final Xbox 360 version of the game, running on actual hardware. For most of this analysis, it'll be centered around the earliest build of the game, the June 24th build, and I'll chronologically reference the other builds when differences crop up. There's no way to pinpoint the exact time when a change was made, so when I say something was altered from one build to another, I mean that it was between one time and the next. This video will be split into 3 chapters. The first will tackle the anniversary features, including the main menu, skulls, terminals, co-op, Kinect, 3D support, and classic to remastered graphics switching. Next, I'll showcase the weapons, vehicles, and characters, and finally, the campaign itself. Sadly, there's no Reach multiplayer component with these builds, as that was developed by Certain Affinity, not Saber. Before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to Devin Smith, a former CEA developer, for answering questions I had regarding the development of this game. I really appreciate the insight he gave, and he's overall an awesome person. In other news, my channel has reached 50,000 subscribers. I'm shell-shocked that we made it here as soon as we did, as this was my end of the year goal. I love you all so much. Thank you everyone for your continued support. I wouldn't have gotten this far without all of you. With that said, let's begin this extensive analysis of Halo CEA's betas. We'll begin our deep dive with the main menu. There's no opening video, just going straight to the menu after loading. This game would get an opening video by the July 21st build. Unlike Final, this one only shows the logos from Microsoft and Saber Interactive. Let's start with the June build's title screen and work our way forward. The CEA logo is less pronounced in this build. The text has no shading to it and has some lens flares scattered around. And the background O is a more pronounced blue color. It would take until the final game for the logo to change, now sporting shadowed text, the lens flares disappeared, a border for the background O, and uses a darker blue color. Moving on to the background visuals, the June build shows space with purple accents, an asteroid field towards the bottom of Halo, a more illuminated planet threshold, and a moon in anniversary graphics. Halo itself also has wispy clouds that extend further into space. On the upper left and bottom right corners of the screen, there are these blue diamond patterns that fade in and out. The July 1st build's background is mostly the same, but the lights on Halo are white instead of blue. The July 8th builds are effectively the same as the June builds, with Halo's lights back to being blue. The July 21st build saw noticeable changes. The skybox is more blue now, and an anniversary version of the distant galaxy has appeared. The asteroids are now animated, spinning and drifting through space. On Halo, more blue lights were added to the darker areas of its underside. One notable omission was the moon. Even in the final game, it's gone. The diamond patterns from before are gone by this build too, replaced by a hexagonal pattern that only appears in the menu setting screens. In the July 28th build, space is even more blue now, Threshold isn't as illuminated, the distant galaxy got a small redesign, and the overall lighting of the scene has shifted, with the sun moving to a different place. By retail, space has returned to a more purple color, the galaxy was redesigned again, most of the asteroids have been removed, and the wispy clouds have been replaced with a more realistic cloud layer that's closer to Halo's surface. The hexagonal patterns on the corners of the screen have been replaced once again by this design that I can't really describe. Before moving on to the settings, I'll showcase switching between the graphics. In all 5 pre-release builds, there's no transition effect that plays when switching. The game hitches as it switches, and there's heavy texture pop-in. The final game uses a fade to black effect to mask the blemishes, although MCC CEA now switches instantly. In the June 24th and July 1st builds, players needed to press back and B to switch graphics, with the rest of the builds just using back. Devin Smith told me that graphic switching was originally a developer tool, not a game feature. This explains the back B button combo, because other dev-only tools, such as NoClip and God Mode, can be activated with back A and back X respectively. On to the title screen settings. The middle two are grayed out, with one reading Halo Reach Multiplayer and the other Waypoint. In order to access the settings menu, you have to select Campaign first, then press Start. By the July 21st build, the middle two options are selectable. Reach Multiplayer was renamed to Halo Anniversary Multiplayer. You can also access the settings menu from the title screen. None of these pre-release builds come with Halo Reach maps, so what happens if we select Multiplayer? The game takes us to a debug video chat room. To access its contents, it requires Xbox Live and a Kinect sensor. You select a name and the quality of your camera feed, and you'll host a video chat session. Selecting Waypoint doesn't work, even if you install Halo Waypoint on your Xbox. Selecting Waypoint in the July 28th build crashes the game. By retail, Multiplayer was renamed to Halo Reach Anniversary Multiplayer, and Waypoint is now Halo Waypoint. The campaign menu is mostly unchanged from June to retail, but there are some differences. On the bottom right, it shows you what network model you're using, whether it's local, System Link, or Xbox Live. This was removed by the July 21st build, and was likely just a debug feature. The My Party section has a second label named UI in Menu. By the July 1st build, it be properly named to In Menu. If anyone's in your LAN connection, a second window named UI LAN Players will appear, which would be renamed to System Link by the July 21st build. In the network mode screen, the description for My Xbox 360 console ends on the word This. System Link Games has this for its description, and Xbox Live Friends has this for its description. There's only one setting for Xbox Live Friends. By the July 8th build, My Xbox 360 console's description has its ending. Both System Link and My Xbox Live Friends mention Halo Spark, the internal name for CEA. The final game has mentions of Halo Spark replaced with Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, and Xbox Live Friends is split to open and private lobbies. The Mission Select screen uses in-game previews for the map images in this build. The July 21st build has new previews for Halo and the Maw, with Halo specifically using concept art. The final game no longer uses in-game images, only concept art. This is the layout for the controls menu. By the July 21st build, the text color was changed to white. There's less spacing between options, the controller image was moved to the bottom of the screen, and the default string is glitched. The July 28th build centered the controller options, and in retail, the black bars surrounding the stick controls were made larger, and icons for exiting the page and the player profile were added. As for the video menu, here's the June layout. By the July 21st build, the 3D mode strength setting was added, and enabling 3D mode actually works if you don't own a 3D TV. The default button was also removed. The July 28th build centered the text, and the final game added the default button back, renamed Legacy Mode to Classic Mode, added the music setting, and 3D mode no longer worked if you were not using a 3D TV. The skulls are up next. The cut Bang Bang skull is natively available in all 5 pre-release skull menus. For those unaware, this replaces the assault rifle's firing sounds with pew pew noises.
Pew, 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 pew.
Devin Smith mentions that the skull was ultimately cut due to time constraints and priority shifts. This explains why only the assault rifle is effective by the skull. They ran out of time to incorporate the other weapons. Bang Bang is still in retail, but modding is required to re-enable it. The Black Eye skull went through a number of iterations. If the player takes damage and tries to melee an enemy, they sometimes won't have their shields recharge. This is because the player has to wait the same amount of time it takes for the shield to start recharging during normal gameplay, which is 6 seconds. After those 6 seconds have passed, players can get shields back through melee attacks. However, they only get 25% back per hit, and recovery is not instant. In the July 8th build, players can now get shields back immediately after taking damage, but they only get 10% back this time. It doesn't matter because the shield recharges on its own anyway, and I suspect this wasn't intentional. By retail, Black Eye instantly recharges your shields to 100% with one hit. The Grunt Birthday Party skull uses heart-shaped particle effects in the pre-release builds, which were swapped for confetti in retail. The other Grunt-related skull, Grunt Funeral, has an interesting history. The icon it uses is a wrench instead of a dead grunt. That's because the Grunt Funeral skull replaced the slot of another cut skull, Engineer. The unlock marker for it can be found on keys, in the coolant pool to the right of the gravity lift. However, it doesn't unlock the Grunt Funeral skull, or any other skull for that matter. Devin Smith didn't fully remember what the Engineer skull was meant to do, if it ever had any effects at all. Skull locations and menu icons were implemented first before the actual effects were. He believes that it was likely meant to give players or enemies the Engineer shields from ODST and Reach, but will likely never know for sure. The in-game effects for Grunt Funeral differ from retail as well. The resulting explosion is a frag grenades instead, and there's no damage effect tied to it. By the July 1st build, the Grunt Funeral icon would be replaced with the dead grunt. The July 8th build uses plasma grenade explosions for Grunt Funeral, and deal damage now, along with an extra plasma grenade that's launched in the air, resulting in a second explosion. The July 21st build has the final version, removing that second plasma grenade. The Extras menu doesn't have the credits yet, and wouldn't get them until the finished product. The library only consists of a T-posing elite. Accessing the library makes the elite appear in the title screen, and you can still control it. The July 21st build has the first known update to the library. More entries appear, but they don't display anything. The green bar on the bottom left represents what will become the Kinect controls, specifically moving your left hand across your midsection to go back a screen. The July 28th build added some polish to the library. Many of the menu entries are named properly, and models for each entry are present. However, the models are not animated, there's only one camera position that often clips through certain objects, many of the entries lack descriptions, and Kinect does not work here. All of these would be sorted out by retail. Now onto the Kinect features. Not including the final game, Kinect support is only on the July 28th build. Voice commands work, but not all of them are implemented yet. With Scan not being present in this build, there's no way to add content to the library. The Analyze feature has some differences. The player can still fire their weapons when using it, and it won't deactivate when taking damage. Only enemies are marked, and some effects can still play on them even outside Analyze mode. The Analyze command can also be activated by saying Cortana. Devin Smith mentioned that the Cortana variant was cut because NPCs that say Cortana can accidentally activate Analyze. And here's an example of this.
Soldier, remember you're a leatherneck. Cortana, if you and the Chief can get us into one of those Covenant dropships, I can fly us out of here.
In retail, Analyze has a new reticle. Everything scannable is marked, the mark effects only play in this mode, and shooting or taking damage takes you out of Analyze. Next are the terminal videos. The June build has none of the actual terminal videos, only using a placeholder depicting the opening cutscene of 343 Guilty Spark. If you play them in the menu, it doesn't cover the entire screen, with parts of the main menu still showing up. The terminal videos make their first appearance in the July 1st build. They have many subtle differences from the final versions, such as missing audio tracks, placeholder effects, different camera angles, and no letterboxing. I uploaded all of these terminals in separate videos, and I'll link them in the description so you can watch them in full. I won't go over each and every difference as we'd be here forever, but I will point out a few of the more notable changes. In the 8th terminal, there's a scene where Halo is wiping out life in the galaxy, showing an amphibian-like creature being vaporized. In the July 1st build, this was depicted as an unknown, technologically advanced species that we can see up close. At the end of this terminal, the Didact's eyes appear, along with multiple copies of them. The 9th terminal video has visuals that are out of order. Disturbingly, Keyes unintentionally calls Dr. Halsey Miranda.
Miranda, is that you?
Forget everything.
Devin Smith mentioned that this accident became an inside joke during development, used whenever something was out of place. The 10th terminal doesn't appear in the July 1st build, only using the first terminal video as a placeholder. It's in the July 8th build in its blockout stage, and as Spark brings up the Didact again, the latter's eyes appear once more. All of these video differences were changed by the July 28th build, matching their retail counterparts. To wrap this chapter up, let's talk about co-op. Xbox Live is disabled for all 5 pre-release builds, so LAN tunneling through services like Xlink Kai is the only way to play co-op online. Co-op itself doesn't work at all in the June build, with the game hitching the moment a level loads. It does begin working in the July 1st build though, but its online functionality is inconsistent. Sometimes the game will freeze for the client as a level loads, rendering them unable to play. Through testing with some of my friends, we found more success when each player selected the same level in the main menu. This also meant that after finishing a level, it was impossible for the client to load into the next. Co-op got more consistent by the July 21st build, where it didn't matter what level the client selected. When playing a solo game in LAN mode, a co-op biped will spawn on the level, but no one controls it. I did find an interesting quirk through actual co-op play. Some of the weapon display shaders, such as the assault rifle's ammo counter and the heat gauges on the plasma pistol and plasma rifle, only display the host's readings. For example, a client's assault rifle will only see the host's magazine ammo count, even when the client isn't firing. If the client picks up an assault rifle before the host, no numbers will display since there's nothing to read. As for the plasma weapons, the heat gauges are centered around the host's actions as well, along with the plasma pistol's charging effects. Analyzing the CE Anniversary build provides a unique situation. Since the gameplay is one for one with the original, all of the weapon, vehicle, and character differences will be audio-visual as opposed to mechanical. The most significant involve the assault rifle and pistol, both using their Halo Reach models in the first 2 pre-release builds. Starting with the assault rifle, it seems a tad thinner than its appearance in the E3 2011 announcement trailer, as well as the Silent Cartographer demonstration. It's thin enough to where there's spacing between the weapon and Master Chief's hand. The assault rifle's first-person model has a built-in flashlight, but it's dim and illuminates nothing. When reloading, the magazine doesn't quite reach the mag well, floating in thin air. There's quite a few interesting bits on the ammo counter. Compared to Halo Reach, the numbers use a different font, and it only displays 1 digit upon reaching 9 rounds. In third person, nothing appears on its screen. Lord Zed made a discovery that along with the plasma weapon heat gauges, the assault rifle's display shader uses flash video. Through some technical trickery, you can swap these out with any compatible flash video. The July 8th build was when Halo 3's assault rifle was just being implemented. The ammo counter uses yet another font, but this one's too big, making it offset on screen. During a reload, most of the magazine is missing, By the July 21st build, the ammo counter uses its retail font. The rest of the magazine now appears when reloading. By retail, the ammo counter now shows the second digit when it reaches 9 rounds. Next up is the pistol. It too seems thinner than its appearance in the Silent Cartographer demo, leaving a gap from the weapon to the hand. The transparency on both the Misraya Armory and Model 6G decals are broken compared to its Halo Reach counterpart. The red light on this screw is also missing. The Halo 3 Magnum model is used in the July 8th build. The internal materials of the Magnum aren't properly set up and appear black. The Magnum's model decal is labeled Model 6C, the same error that the actual Halo 3 version uses. While using active camo, the majority of the pistol does not use the camo shader, with only the rear sights becoming invisible. By the July 21st build, the entire model uses the camo shader, and the model decal has been relabeled as the Model 6D. By retail, the internal materials were fixed. We move on to the plasma pistol. The pilot light is missing, while the heat gauge and the iron sight's heat indicator are not set up properly. The overheat effects are also minimalistic in this build. When firing the plasma pistol, the entire heat gauge lights up, and when charging, it goes from white to red. By retail, the heat indicator shaders look and perform as they should, and the green pilot light is now visible. The other plasma weapon, the plasma rifle, is up next. The indicator lights are green. The third-person model's heat gauge has a transparency issue, with its border being visible. The July 1st build would change the indicator lights from green to blue. By July 8th, the third-person model's heat gauge no longer has a visible border. The Needler went through a few subtle changes. Its projectiles lack contrails. The needles do not camouflage, and look at where they go after firing. By retail, the needles properly camouflage under active camo, and have gained an interesting effect, looking like energy flowing through them. The projectiles have also gained their contrails. The sniper rifle's reticle is noticeably low res. The first-person view model is different, to the point where the scope clips into the camera while firing. The night vision display is also much greener in this build. While using camo, the screen doesn't turn invisible, as well as the UNSC decals. While zooming in, activating night vision changes the border's dimensions. We also have two differences in classic graphics of all places. The elevation markers are too low res, and haven't been updated for CEA. When using night vision, the effects are severely glitched, especially when the frame rate dips. The July 8th build updates the reticle to its final rendition. The July 28th build changes the first-person model to prevent the scope from clipping anymore. By retail, the night vision display is much darker, and active camo hides it. The UNSC decals were removed as well. The rocket launcher is not too different from its final counterpart. The firing sounds, as well as the explosion effects, occasionally glitch out. Under active camo, the weapon's lights and decals remain visible. All of this would be corrected by retail. The shotgun received a few changes. Like its Halo Reach counterpart, the iron sights were red, and the stripe on the stock is yellow. During a reload, the shells are not rendered, and the loading port isn't animated. By the July 8th build, the sights are now blue, and the reload has visible shells and an animated loading port, and by retail, the color of the stock stripe is now blue. The plasma grenade leaves behind bright explosion decals in the pre-release builds, which were changed by retail to be dimmer. Going through Halo 1's unusable weapons, let's start with the energy sword. The only difference I could find is for its melee sound. It still uses the original CE sound. By the July 8th build, it would be changed to its final iteration. The other unusable weapon is the fuel rod gun. In all the pre-release builds, it's missing the failsafe effects, and there's a strange firing effect bug. Each time it fires, a needle spawns on the firing effect marker. The lights on the fuel rod are green. In fact, these are the same light shaders the plasma rifle uses, so upon the July 1st build, when they changed to blue, so too did the fuel rods, which they still are in retail. The other aforementioned differences wouldn't be finalized until the finished game. The failsafe effects are now present, and needles no longer spawn when it fires. There's one weapon hidden in the files for library and keys, the flamethrower. In retail, this weapon still exists, but when trying to pick it up, the game crashes. Through modding, I can fix the element that causes the crash. In the pre-release builds, however, the flamethrower not only works, but has an untextured anniversary model. The mechanics of the flamethrower are the same as the Gearbox rendition. Let's move on to the vehicles, starting with the Warthog. The engine sounds are different. The machine gun turret's firing sounds would change over time as well. Next up is the Scorpion. Nothing was animated on it. The turret was locked in place and the hatch remained closed. The ambient occlusion was glitched, making the Scorpion look see-through. By the July 8th build, the Scorpion got its animations, and it's no longer see-through. The 4 dots that serve as the fire recovery time are messed up. The coaxial gun's model is in the wrong spot. The firing effects, however, are where they should be. By retail, the recovery dots in the crosshair work properly, and the coaxial gun was shifted to the proper location. As for the Ghost, the screens on the display console are untextured. By the July 21st build, the screens have their textures, then by retail, a light beneath the Ghost turns on when someone drives it. The Banshee has this flap at the bottom of the canopy, which causes clipping when pilots enter the vehicle. This flap had an animation in Reach that sealed off the canopy when the vehicle was powered. Since no such animation exists for the CE Banshee, this part of the model remained static. By the July 21st build, this flap was removed entirely. The Shade turret's projectiles, which it shares with the Spirit dropship, are hardly noticeable in certain lighting conditions. The shell textures are more orange, while the screen textures are missing. On the turret's base, the anti-gravity volume uses the Shade turret's main textures. Due to the turret's model, Chief's hands and feet clip through it. There's a light on the barrel that's not seen in retail. By the July 21st build, the screen shaders have been added, and its projectiles would take on a more bluish hue. By the July 28th build, the shell textures would be changed to have a pinkish purple hue to the vehicle, and the light on the barrel was removed. The model was also updated to prevent any more clipping with the user's limbs. By retail, the anti-gravity volume would have its proper materials, and the projectiles are pink. Moving on to the unusable vehicles, let's start with the Wraith. It wasn't animated just yet, with the mortar turret remaining closed while the vehicle was active. The shaders also take on a greener hue, similar to what it looked like in the Halo Reach beta. The Wraith would have its animations by the July 21st build, and the shaders would be finalized by the July 28th build. By retail, just like with the Ghost, a blue light was added that turns on while the vehicle is active. The Pelican is missing its decals, such as the Echo 419 and Victor 933 designators. It's also missing the built-in pilot that's featured in the final game's Pelican. Something strange happened with the model in the July 1st build. Most of the model was shifted upwards, to the point where passengers clipped through the cargo bay's floor. This would be corrected by the July 8th build, along with the built-in pilot being added to the cockpit. By retail, the decals will be added in. The last vehicle I'll cover is the Spirit dropship. For a while, the turret was not animated yet. Similar to the July 1st build's Pelican model, the July 8th build's Spirit model was shifted upwards as well, with the plasma effects and turret remaining in their normal positions. The July 21st build would correct this, along with the turret finally being animated. Now it's time to shift to the characters, starting with the grunts. While the minor variant is effectively final, the major variant has one noticeable difference. The gear on its backpack is static and illuminated with teal lights. By the July 21st build, the materials for this gear have disappeared. However, it would reappear by the July 28th build, being properly animated this time. The Spec Ops grunts have a messed up permutation, using a combination of the minor and major backpacks. This would be corrected by the July 21st build, just using the major's backpack. The Jackal's differences revolve around the shields. They use the CE model, and they're not attached to the right marker. When the Jackal sidesteps, the shield clips through the body. The July 21st build would use the Halo Reach Jackal shields, which feature one opening for a left-hand configuration. The July 28th build uses the final Jackal shield model, and it no longer clips through the body when the Jackal sidesteps. When pinged, the Elite shields were brighter. They also don't properly hold their weapons. The Elite Major's armor color was a light pink. By the July 21st build, the Major's armor became its finalized crimson color, and they held their weapons properly. By retail, the shield ping effects were dimmed and not as noticeable. The one visual difference with the Hunters involves the tubes on their guns. Their shaders aren't complete, with hints of purple being seen. The retail version has them entirely green. The Flood are up next. The tips of the tendrils for the infection and combat forms are a faded red color. Combat forms don't have destructible limbs in Anniversary graphics. Shooting them causes untextured pieces to expel from their bodies. By the July 21st build, their limbs can be destroyed, and the tendrils are a brighter red color. By retail, the destroyed pieces got their textures. The Sentinel's destruction effects use standard fire effects. When spawning the Sentinel beam through the Cheat All Weapons command, it comes with the Sentinel's entire model. This would change by the July 8th build with no model present. By retail, their destruction effects use blue flames. 343 Guilty Spark doesn't have the blinking light used for speech. He also has a brighter blue light attached to his body, which likely would have been used to help the player navigate the library. In the July 28th build, this light became a dimmer blue color. By retail, his body light was cut entirely, while gaining his speech light. Our final faction is the UNSC. Not a single human NPC had lip sync data outside of cutscenes, and wouldn't get it until retail. Starting with the Marines, their armor was brighter, and the armored variants had a sniper clip on their left shoulder. The crewman's suit was a different design as well. Something happened by the July 8th build, and the humans are like this. By the July 21st build, the Marines have their final brown colored armor, and the sniper clip on their shoulder was removed. The crewmen also sport their final design. The retail Marines have new UNSC decals on their left shoulder pads. Sergeant Johnson's face looked entirely different in pre-release, and wouldn't get his final design until the July 21st build. Captain Keyes looks the same as he does in final, but on 343 Guilty Spark, he wears Marine gear, a design which goes unused in retail. This was being phased out by the July 8th build, with the captain wearing his dress uniform. However, the other Keyes biped used in this cutscene still retains the Marine gear. By July 21st, both bipeds would wear the dress uniform. Our final character analysis is for John Halo himself, the Master Chief. While older depictions of him use the Halo Reach Mark V armor, as well as the E3 2011 design, the version here is actually the final design. However, just like the Elites, he doesn't hold many of the weapons properly, and wouldn't do so until the July 28th build.
Tied the leader. Lost the lead. Tied the leader. Lost the lead. Tied the leader. Gained the lead. Double kill.
Ever since I started looking into these builds, the campaign's development fascinated me. Within a little over a month, a plethora of visual changes were implemented. For example, the campaign has a ton of lighting differences in each playable area, so instead of mentioning all 8 billion of them, I'll only talk about fundamental lighting changes that artistically affect the setting. This goes for every difference in general. I only want to showcase noticeable, drastic changes that don't need the Hubble Space Telescope to notice. Let's start with Pillar of Autumn. The first scene of the opening cutscene is shot differently. The longswords fly around the autumn much faster, with one of them even going behind Halo's smaller than it looks model. The autumn itself uses different textures, similar to those on the actual Reach version. By retail, the longswords no longer fly at breakneck speeds, and the autumn has updated, higher resolution textures. A different version of this scene that is shot like in the original game was added to Final, appearing on Legendary. Captain Keyes is by himself on the bridge because most of the human bipeds don't render. This is an issue that plagues all of the June build's cutscenes. The July 1st build has this fixed. The hangar underwent a multitude of changes throughout development. When we get to Johnson's speech to the Marines, only the normal difficulty type has been animated. If we play this on any other difficulty, the audio will desync up until Master Chief leaves his pod.
Man, we let those dumb bugs out to the middle of nowhere to keep them from getting their filthy claws on Earth. But we stumbled onto something they're so hot for that they're scrambling over each other to get it. Well, I don't care if it's God's own anti-son of a bitch machine or a giant hula hoop, we're not gonna let them have it. What we will let them have is a belly full of lead and a pool of their own blood to drown in. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Damn right I am. Now move it out. Double time.
Attention all personnel. We are re-engaging the enemy. External and internal contact imminent.
All you greenhorns who wanted to see Covenant up close, this is gonna be your lucky day.
Sir?
Right. Let's thaw him out.
Okay. Bringing low-level systems online. Cracking the case in 30 seconds. He's hot! Blowing the pins in 5!
During the cryo room tutorial, looking down reveals a colorless Mark V suit, using the same design from the original game. This happens because it's part of the cryopod's model, and can be seen in classic graphics in certain angles as well. The armor was removed from anniversary graphics by the July 1st build. The device for the energy shield test is always active, while in the final game, the effects play when the test starts. At the bridge, the billboard outside it is the same as the classic one. By the July 21st build, the anniversary billboard appears. The troll face on Requiem was much larger in pre-release. By July 28th, the billboard received a physical border. Then by retail, the troll face considerably shrunk. The bridge cutscene's main differences revolve around Cortana's animations. The Meg Easter egg does not appear in anniversary graphics, and wouldn't show up until the July 8th build. In the room opposite the one overlooking the cryo chamber, the displays showing the vitals depict Master Chief instead of Linda. It would take until retail for this change to be implemented. Fun fact, the Linda egg was Devin Smith's call, and he had a heartwarming note about this. His mom, who's also named Linda, thought the egg was a reference to her, and Devin never corrected her about it. It took a while for the final cutscene to receive polish. The LifePod's door wasn't animated, with Chief and the Marine clipping through it. The object scaling was way off, with Halo looking tiny compared to the LifePod. Finally, when the LifePod's about to enter Halo's atmosphere, the object used to render the close-up of Halo hadn't been implemented yet, and wouldn't be until July 21st. Next up is Halo. The opening cutscene's camera angles are the same as the original, with the July 21st build switching to the anniversary positions. This level went through quite a few style changes before landing on the final aesthetic. The first known iteration depicts a late afternoon setting. The July 21st build overhauled the lighting, going for a style very close to the original, with the July 28th build looking even more like classic CE. The grassy areas didn't have any weeds, getting them in the July 1st build. The LifePod has broken ambient occlusion just like the Scorpion, and the pilot's looking a little under the weather. The skybox went through a few revisions too. The water didn't have its textures yet. It would get them in the July 1st build, and would slowly receive more polish as time went on. The geometry near the cliffs were even less accurate than they are in retail. Quite a few areas lacked collision. There's a notable spot right before the second encounter. Players can just walk right into the cliff here and see all the way to the tunnel area. This entire mission is filled with seams cutting through the geometry, and would take until the July 21st build for all of them to be removed. At the next encounter, these Forerunner crates aren't supposed to be here. By retail, they were removed. This spot on the beam tower has a green decal without transparency, and this spot to the side of the tower doesn't have a proper texture. This small Forerunner building has an interesting history, including the ones that appear in the second half of the level. The overall design differs from retail, with much less detail in the geometry and a border of lights surrounding the building. Inside, there's a ton of Z-fighting, with the metal floor and ground textures overlapping. The lights on the corner pieces don't have textures yet. The building at the head of the river objective has the wrong door modeled in. It's impossible to enter through here, but this wall on the left side has no collision. At the cliff edge building, this indoor piece isn't supposed to be here, and can be walked through. By the July 21st build, the building's final design was implemented, but new errors cropped up. The doors for this building are now modeled in the wrong spot, and the floor still suffers from Z-fighting. The building at the river objective seems to have fixed the entrance issues, but there's still a fake leading to the ramp. The cliffside buildings interest me the most because they still use the older design. Even in retail, they stick to the style. As for the other buildings, it'd take until the final game to iron out the aforementioned issues. The totally natural formation was noticeably dimmer in pre-release, with no lights installed anywhere. The July 28th build changed this, with lights on the walls and floor tiles. The retail version cut down on the amount of floor lights. In the light bridge room, on these ramped surfaces, there's geometry extending out. This fits the textures much better than how the final game has it, where the whole surface looks way too flat. This was likely changed because of this geo not existing in classic graphics, creating a discrepancy. At the light switch, there's a red triangle randomly present, which was removed by the July 1st build. At the next outdoor section, the river is a bluer color, unlike in the beginning area. However, in the July 8th build, the water is missing, even all the way to the waterfall. The area's liquidity would come back by the July 21st build, although the waterfall is still not present, and wouldn't return until the final game. At the entrance to the cliffside objective, these lights don't properly light up, getting that ability in retail. The final thing I'd like to mention for this level is the main beam tower at cliffside. The interiors have a ton of errors present. Many surfaces are see-through, and there's Z-fighting on the ceiling. The July 8th build fixes the see-through issues, and retail removed the Z-fighting. We now move on to Truth and Reconciliation, which doesn't have many noticeable differences. Right at the start, there's a Halo 3 terminal placed at the landing zone. Activating it will play a portion of the motion comic The Return. Why this was here was anyone's guess, but it would be removed by retail. The Truth and Reconciliation itself went through some design changes. On the second floor in the hangar, these tubes are covered by a hexagonal barrier, which was removed by retail. The final cutscene plays out as normal, but the last shot doesn't render properly, and wouldn't do so until the final game. The silent cartographer is up next. At the entrance to the cartographer, the cliff geometry is inaccurate. This was fixed by the July 21st build. Inside the cartographer building, the lights on this wall are a deep red color. By retail, it was changed to blue. The most significant difference is where the famine skull is located. It's directly above the security override building's entrance. The easiest way to get up here is to grenade jump twice in these two spots. By the July 21st build, the skull was moved to its final location. Assault in the control room has a metric ton of small changes. Right at the start, these placeholder snow effects play in almost every indoor area. In the beginning room, the door leading to the first hallway clips through the top part of the frame. This was fixed by retail. The lights here use different colors throughout development. All the copy-paste rooms went through a plethora of small updates and design changes, so to save time, and my breath, I'll show you all the important ones and how they changed over time. At the first bridge, one of the energy connectors is not implemented, and the one that is uses placeholder effects. It would take until the final game for both of them to appear using their finished designs. The lights under the bridge are blocky placeholders, and would be updated to proper lights by July 1st. Outside, the textures for tire tracks in the snow are splotchy placeholders. They would take shape by the July 28th build, and would look more natural by retail. The entrance to the tunnel area still uses the original geometry, with large seams where snow should be. Inside, the control panel is in the wrong spot, and the door uses a different design, including a window showing the opposite side. The July 1st build has new geometry for the entrance. Some of it has panels that lack collision, allowing you to see through the map. The door to the next area now uses its final design. The entrance frame was visually updated by July 21st, and it's no longer possible to clip through the wall panels. By retail, the control panel is finally in the right spot. A few other control panels throughout the tunnel are also incorrectly placed, and they wouldn't be fixed until retail. The yellow lights that line the walls turn a purplish blue color by the July 21st build. At the exit, the Forerunner frame just uses a simple texture all around. It got a more complex set of textures than the July 8th build, and would receive more polish by July 21st. The building that serves as the landing pad on 2 Betrayals has a lot of errors. There are seams by the doorways, and the floor texture is not made of glass. On top of the building, the geometry is precisely the same as CE's, and the landing zone icon by the Banshee is missing. The platforms on the cliffs use yellow lights on their edges. In the July 28th build, the floor is now made of glass, and a new decal was added by the Banshee up top. In the final game, the seams by the doors were closed, a more accurate decal by the Banshee was implemented, and the lights on the upper platforms were turned light blue. Later in the mission, we reach the 2 bridges. On the second bridge, the glass walls don't render in anniversary graphics. By July 1st, the design for them changed, and by July 21st, the second set of glass became visible. At the final exterior section, the ziggurat went through some small changes. The most important factor is the location of the terminal. Its original location was on this icy cliff. It was likely changed for accessibility reasons. You can't get up here without a Banshee. It was moved to its final location by the July 21st build. Finally, the control room underwent a ton of polish over time. As we make our way to the Florida Everglades, 343 Guilty Spark is our next mission. It doesn't have a lot of substantial differences. However, right off the bat, we have the Recession Skull located elsewhere, and its original position was so damn cool. It requires players to do the out of bounds trick by throwing grenades before exiting the Pelican. We stay until it lands and walk forward for almost 2 minutes. We'll eventually find the skull sitting next to a tree, but more importantly, it's on the opposite side of the hidden marine. Devin Smith explains why this skull, as well as the Famine Skull inside the Cartographer, had their locations changed. As cool as it was for longtime fans, the age of internet videos was still young and not as reliable for people to follow en masse. The edict was that the classic, fan-loved glitches were to be maintained, but adding content to those areas was putting a hat on a hat. It's not creating new secrets if they were where the old ones already existed. As for the swamp itself, outside of lighting, it's nearly the same as retail, except for the lack of rain, which was added to the July 1st build. In the Flood reveal room, there are yellow cubes that represent the light volumes that will appear by retail. The library is also not that different in these builds. There's a pretty bad rendering issue on the circular platforms surrounding the index. Depending on where the player stands, parts of the level will disappear, until there's nothing but complete darkness. These wall pieces are not animated yet, and won't be until the final game. On the 3rd floor, at the door leading back to the main room, there's some inaccurate geometry on the wall here, which would be corrected by retail. The elevators look fine in the June build, but something happened in the July 21st build, and they're not rendered until the player rises a few meters in the air. This would be fixed by the final game. These blue panels are extremely loud in pre-release. Most of the differences in 2 Betrayals are the same ones from Assault on the Control Room, so I'll just focus on the changes specific to 2 Betrayals. The pulse generators have placeholder volumes where the effects should be, and the decals on the ceiling are just orange squares. The generator's effects appear in the July 1st build, and the decals by the July 21st build. Much later in the level, after getting the second generator, there's the door that's destroyed when it opens. It still uses the original version's design. It wouldn't be until retail where it uses the anniversary design like the other doors. Our penultimate level, Keys, is up next, and it has one of the few gameplay differences in this entire analysis. Falling into the coolant pool will not work, because the cutscene for it appears too late. The player dies right at the point the cutscene starts, preventing progress. The way around this is to use God mode, and the cutscene will eventually play. The glitch was fixed by the July 8th build. The coolant falls are in a work in progress state, and they'd be finished by the July 21st build. The Proto-Gravemind shaders were a brighter green color, allowing the human faces to stand out more. In retail, it's a more mossy green color. The final cutscene doesn't render the whole scene properly, and wouldn't do so until July 21st. The Maw, our final frontier, was one of the last levels to receive graphical polish. The exterior section during the opening cutscene went through a few iterations. The floors in the destroyed hallways are still perfectly straightened, causing the player to clip through them. It wouldn't be until retail for this to be corrected. A lot of the materials inside the bridge are messed up, with parts of the display screen using an active camo-like texture. The cutscene is also extremely unpolished, especially when it cuts to the engine room. Quite a few objects in here use placeholder textures, and even their old CE models. In the cryo chamber, these objects, like the ones in the engine room, use the original CE models and placeholder textures. They were finalized by the July 8th build. After going through the last set of maintenance tunnels, in the room with the dead elites and flood corpses, there's a pillar that's not supposed to be here, hence the lack of collision. It would be removed by retail. In the armory, there's the table with all the rocket ammo. The geometry is not accurate to the original collision, with weapons clipping through it. Also, the stealth combat forms don't have their camo working in anniversary graphics. This area next to the hallway before the elevator has a pretty bad portaling issue, and the parking spaces holding the warthogs are untextured. All of these issues will be fixed by the final game. The Warthog run went through a texture overhaul as development progressed. The ledge holding the Grunt birthday party skull has an interesting history. It was pretty accurate in the June build, but by the July 8th build, the geometry was changed to be more detailed, but it was no longer accurate to the original collision. It would take until retail for this to be corrected. The final cutscene lacked polish, so much so, the skybox doesn't change to outer space. To finally wrap up this extensive analysis, the game didn't end properly. The main menu's music and camera angles would activate, but the level doesn't change, simply taking the camera to the Maw's origin point. It would then start moving through the menu's camera track, and the player can't do anything here. This would be fixed by the final game. Whew! And that's going to be it for this full analysis. If you made it this far, you're absolutely a real one, and I hope you got a lot out of this video. I'd like to thank Devin Smith once again for taking the time to answer my CEA questions, and being an awesome person in general. He made this video significantly better, and I'm eternally grateful. If, and only if, you liked what you saw, hit the like button, leave a comment on your thoughts on CEA's development, subscribe for more Halo content from this channel, and ring the bell to never miss an upload. If you want to further support the channel, I have my Patreon page or my Needler Gang YouTube membership. Having access to either of these allow you to see my longer form videos 2 days early, along with a video shoutout. I'd like to thank my Sangheili Zealots, my counselors, and my Needler Gang YouTube members for their patronage to the channel. It means so much to me, and I owe my success to you. This is the Vengeful Vadam. You matter more than you think you do, and I'll see you on the great journey.